Fuji's motto for the X-E4 campaign is make more with less. And when it comes to the X-E4, I couldn't agree more. When I sold my Fuji X-Pro 3 over a year ago, I started to feel a little disconnected from photography once again. And this is because if you have ever shot with a Fuji camera, you will know the feeling it brings to both your creativity and the whole process of taking photos. So when the X-E4 was announced, I was both intrigued and unsure about what I thought about this camera. In fact, I brought out a video about why I wouldn't buy it. But in the end, I felt I needed to give it a try. And after over a year of use, I want to tell you why this camera never leaves my side. Firstly, I don't want to talk about all the specs of this camera, as these can easily be found online, and there are numerous videos tearing this camera apart to tell you why it's not for you, but I want to tell you from a photographer's point of view why this camera is. One thing I love about Fuji cameras is that photographers can choose their cameras based solely on their preferences for budget, form factor and style without compromising on the quality of the images the camera can produce. The X-E4 is a compact camera in a rangefinder style body similar to the X100V, but with the ability to interchange the lenses. It also houses Fuji's flagship 26.1 megapixel X-Trans sensor, which can be found in the top lineup cameras such as the X-T4, X-Pro 3 and the X100V. So you will get the same amazing results and excellent performance and that well-known colour science which we have come to love from Fuji. But with all that, it does lack a few features you would see in the slightly more expensive cameras, but more on that later. When looking at who I would say this camera is marketed toward, I would say it's going to suit the everyday enthusiast shooter and of course street photographer, falling in the same category as the X-T30 and the XS10, although I do know a few professionals using it for their work, and I myself have taken it on a few professional shoots, and I find it really useful as a BTS camera as I can easily throw it into my backpack. It's also Fuji's cheapest offering in the X series lineup, coming in at £799 for the body or £949 for the kit, including the updated version of the XF 27mm 2.8 lens. The sole reason I chose to go with the X-E4 in the end is because I love the look and style of the X100V, but I really value and love having the ability to interchange my lenses to allow me to experiment with my photography and try new styles. The X-E4, as with most of the FUJIFILM cameras, really brings that retro feel and replicates the look and feel of a classic film camera. And one of the biggest reasons it's so fun to shoot. I have to say that every time I see this camera on the side, it just makes me want to pick it up and take photographs. The build quality of this camera is solid. The exterior of the camera is a thing of beauty with its straight lines and subtle curves adopted clearly from its X100V brother, and it feels really nice in the hand. The materials used certainly feel premium and durable. The top and bottom plates are made of high precision moulded magnesium that feel robust, and I really like the grippy feel of the leatherette that wraps around the camera's exterior. The top dials are made of the same precision machined magnesium as the top and bottom plates and have that satisfying clicky sound and knurled surfaces for added ease of use. There are a total of 8 function buttons and 3 dials, and the control layout is really nicely thought out and makes it really easy to operate when on the street. But I do know for some photographers the minimalist style of the X-E4 will disappoint when it comes to customization of the camera, as there are only 3 fully custom buttons on the X-E4, the Q button, the unmarked function button and the AEL AFL button. I do miss the focus button switch on the front of the camera as well, and I'm not sure why Fuji didn't implement this into the camera, as this would have been a really welcomed feature. But for me there are enough, and I haven't ran into many issues switching between modes and styles. The Q menu on the back can easily be accessed to allow me to switch between autofocus and manual focus and between different presets. Now Fuji have brought out an additional grip which screws into the bottom of the 1/4 inch thread and allows a more substantial grip on the side of the camera. But I really like the minimalist feel and simplicity of the camera, and it feels great in my hands already. In fact, I'd even say it looks a little bit like a Leica.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Now I'm shooting mainly with Fuji's f2 18, 35 and 50mm lenses, which are fairly compact, but if you do go for a larger zoom with this camera or something like the 56mm 1.2, you might benefit from the hand grip. One accessory I have added to this camera though is the thumb rest on the rear, which really aids with one-handed shooting and makes the camera a lot more comfortable in your hand. But it can cause some access issues for the top dial and Q menu button, and also if you are a fan of the back button focus method with the AFL button, then the thumb rest can hinder this. But I myself just use the shutter button for autofocus, so this hasn't really been an issue for me. Also to note, I went with a third-party thumb grip, as the Fuji thumb grip is a little bit steep in price in my opinion, so you can save some money there. I will leave some links to the items in the description below. Another thing I love about Fuji lineup is the cameras age really well and they look more stylish and retro as they get older, and when you're out on the streets they don't scream "I'm a really expensive camera." I would say the only downsides to the whole build quality for me are the port doors on the side. They feel a little plasticky and not as robust as the rest of the camera. Also, it's a shame that there is no weather sealing on this model, considering most of the lenses marketed towards the X-E4 are actually weather sealed lenses. But I guess there has to be some kind of trade-off to keep the price low and budget friendly. Also, just to know, I have been out in quite a few weather storms with this camera, from snow to rain, and I haven't had any issues regarding weather sealing. I think most cameras these days are built to take a little bit of beating while out with different kinds of weather, so just exercise a little bit of common sense and I think you'll be just fine. When it comes to Fuji's images and its colour science, I think it's my favourite by far, and it has also made me think a lot about how I take photos and process them. It's hard to put a finger on it, but there's something special about the JPEGs that come straight out of this camera. There are 18 film simulations built into this camera, including the newly added Eterna Bleach Bypass. And these inbuilt colour presets really help make the experience feel much more like shooting film, in the sense that the photos have an intentional look to them the minute I click the shutter. You can also build off these film simulations to create beautiful looks for your images, and since I've started using Fuji, I have been experimenting with the customizable recipes you can dial in by messing with the settings like white balance, clarity, grain effect and tone curve. I also mainly shoot JPEG now, but I do use the JPEG and RAW mode so that I have the option if I feel the need to make modifications in post, which is a rarity these days. When you start playing with the JPEG settings, it really can make you feel more connected to your photography and allow you to enjoy the moments more, knowing that you don't need to spend hours editing and going through the images. And I really love the ability to send the images to my phone using the Fuji app, which is really easy to set up and use. It's also worth noting, while talking about the image quality, that the ISO performance of the X-Trans sensor has really surprised me. Coming from Sony, I was a little bit apprehensive, but I'm happy setting my auto ISO up to 6400 when out doing my photography, and I'd even venture up to something like 12800 to get the right shot. This camera has an amazing ability to make the noise have that almost filmic look. Drop some comments below if you are using the X-E4 and let me know how you're getting along with it. So what's it like in the real world when out doing my photography? While it's not quite small enough to be pocketable like a Ricoh GR, it's easy enough to throw the camera in a jacket pocket, sling bag or backpack while you're on the way out. And it's light enough to carry around my neck for street photography sessions, which is the main way I tend to shoot with this camera. When it comes to autofocus, it's snappy and accurate, even in some unexpected situations. I keep my autofocus setting on all, which allows me to cycle through the modes just by pressing the joystick and flicking the front command dial, which makes it nice and fast while out doing street photography. And as I mainly shoot in aperture priority mode with this camera, controlling exposure via the exposure compensation dial on top of the camera is simple enough. The X-E4 also offers face and eye detection, both of which work really well, although it's not something I tend to use all that much with my style of photography, but overall it does a good job of detecting subjects and sticking to them. I have done a few portrait sessions with the camera and it offers really nice results. I also use the burst function now and then in the high mode, and I use about 8 frames a second and it works really well. The autofocus locks on and it can be a really useful tool when out on the streets. The shutter sound on this camera as well is really smooth and not too loud, and it doesn't draw unwanted attention when out shooting on the street. There is a 3-inch flip touchscreen, which is a great feature to have on this camera, especially for street photography, as it can allow those nice low down shots and also can aid you in being discreet while out shooting. Although sometimes it does decide to flip the image around, which can be annoying, as trying to work backwards is not the easiest thing. I find the touchscreen to be very responsive and useful for quick operation, although at times it's prone to accidental touches which can activate the AF functionality or take a photo, so it can be a little sensitive sometimes. The screen is bright enough to use in direct sunlight, which is nice, and with the same specs as the X100V, X-T4 and X Pro 3, which is 1.62 million dots, it displays photos with beautiful colour and detail as previously mentioned. And having come from the X Pro 3 with its incredible EVF, the X-E4 did feel initially a little bit of a step back, as it's a lot smaller, but for me it's still a useful viewfinder and has enough image quality to easily see what you are composing. In fact, I use the EVF more often to compose my shots than the touchscreen, and I've not had any issues with it and its quality. One of the main questions I get online about the X-E4 is about the lack of Ibis. When it comes to Ibis, it really shouldn't be a deal breaker on this camera. I can happily shoot with little to no camera shake just by pushing the ISO up to 6400 or maybe a little bit higher. And this has allowed me to shoot photos as low as 1/15 with my shutter speed. And I think also with the added Ibis, the camera wouldn't be as compact as it is. Battery life is pretty average, and Fuji claims the X-E4 battery has enough for 380 shots per charge, and I can't complain. I get through a whole street session with one battery most of the time, and I always carry 2 extras just in case. Fujifilm has built in an auto power offsetting into this camera to help save battery, which is nice. There was an issue where the camera would power off and you need to switch the camera on and off to get it back on, but since I've done a firmware update, the camera seems to go to sleep and wake up easily with the press of the shutter button. So thanks for that, Fuji. It really helps when out shooting. So the conclusion to this is, to me, it's a camera that allows me to enjoy the feeling of analog in a digital setup. The film simulations provide straight out of camera results that replicate classic Fujifilm looks, and they do it super well. Sometimes I feel when shooting with full featured digital cameras, it's so easy to get lost in selecting the perfect combination of settings for the moment rather than actually focusing on the moment itself. And having the ability to shoot amazing looking JPEG images and catch moments straight out of camera is great. Without the feeling of having to sit down for hours to edit them all, I can just see them as I want, which to me is priceless and brings more enjoyment to my photography. Although this is nowhere near the perfect camera, I mean, is there ever really a perfect camera? But the one thing that the camera has brought to me is the enjoyment of taking images again and finding a love of photography which I thought was lost. Yes, its minimal design might not be for everyone, but there is definitely a beauty in what Fuji have created here with the X-E4. The tagline for this campaign is, like I said, make more with less, and I totally agree they have done just that. Drop some comments below if you are using the X-E4 and let me know how you're getting on with it. Until the next one, stay safe and keep shooting.